Welcome back to Dick Morris Democracy. Our country is dealing with many hurdles thanks to the Biden administration. My guest today, Michael Wilkerson, founded Stormwall Advisors in 2022 to help lead a new patriotic movement across our country in the years ahead. The mission is to inform, educate, and illuminate all issues that the left-wing media doesn't want you to know about. Michael Wilkerson joins me now. Great to have you here, Michael.
Dick, always a pleasure.
Michael, the administration and the international banking community is hurtling as fast as it can towards central bank issued digital currencies. And they claim that it'll make things more efficient. It'll reduce the clearance times for checks. It'll make the international financial system seamless. But you see a lot more than that, and a lot more of the nefarious stuff. Tell us about it.
Well, I really appreciated your intro. I think you hit the nail on the head. Think about what CBDCs represent. It is the perfection of a system of surveillance and control that already exists today, Dick. So you know that the use of cash has been going down year after year. Governments have been discouraging its use. Transactions that are now done by credit card through the bank accounts. Even today, governments have the ability to surveil them. They do that. They use it. We saw this following January 6th. We saw this with the trucker protests against mandatory vaccine mandates in Canada, where the law enforcement agencies, FBI in our country and others elsewhere, illegally acquired information from the banks. So this process of surveillance and attempts at behavioral control, we are living in this world today. What you rightly point out is that CBDCs, as I said, perfect this system. It will make it much easier to directly shape, first of all, surveil every transaction. When digital transactions are available on the blockchain, the governments can see everything that everyone purchases. And with that surveillance,
and see it
comes
easily.
the ability see it very easily. So today, there's a process they have to go through, whether they do it lawfully or not. They can get at that information. Any financial transaction today that's digital through the banking system, through credit cards, is accessible to the governments of the world. The CBDC will make it instantaneous and give governments the ability to reward good behavior with additional funds, or punish by pulling out funds or restricting access, for example, to flights, to certain public and social events of your own money. So think about it this way, Dick. We're already being taxed. That the government is taking away our money now, but then whatever is left over, they will continue to have the ability to control and to take and to confiscate, even beyond the confiscation, the asset confiscation laws that exist in some states today, which are unjust and which can do the same thing.
The whole system we're talking about would be kind of innocuous. It wouldn't matter. It would be kind of just hypothetical. If it weren't for the increasingly established record of banks using the power they now have to turn off the accounts of conservatives, of religious freedom organizations, or of gun dealers, just because they don't like their policies. In fact, it's a matter of official policy to do that. And if you arm them with the power to turn off everybody's bank account and freeze their assets and stop them from buying chewing gum, you're talking about something that could be very universal and very, very dangerous. It's the clearest indication I've seen of a path to tyranny.
You know, you mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned the 19 state attorneys general that are now pushing back on these big banks that have been behaving in this way. In particular, JP Morgan Chase was one that the AGs targeted. You also mentioned something called Operation Choke Point, which was this idea this plan under the Obama administration to cut off certain industries, certain companies, certain people from the financial system. Well, Dick, we're in the middle of Operation Choke Point.
Use the methods of fighting organized crime and gangs
That's
and
right.
the mob to fight traditional conservative religious or civic groups.
Yes, and today, Dick, we have something called Operation Choke Point 2.0. What is that? Well, they've determined to do the same thing with the entire crypto industry, meaning that they have created a system to stop the on-ramp and off-ramp for crypto-based companies from the banking system. So if you'd like to transact in Bitcoin or in Ethereum, good luck, because the government is trying to communicate to your bank, you're not allowed to do that. Don't transact with these kind of firms, these kind of technologies, which is another way to restrict access and freedom.
Let me just amplify on that based on the stuff you've been telling me in the last couple of months. The government power stems from two things: a monopoly on the legitimate use of force and a monopoly on the issuance of currency. Anybody else that gets convicted of murder or fraud, but the government can do it, or counterfeiting, but the government can do it. And what they're really doing now is using all of the weapons at their disposal under the excuse of fighting organized crime and fighting nefarious corruption to close down the digital industry, the online digital system, to stop Bitcoin and other digital currencies from flourishing or being issued. Not because, as they claim, that they're mob linked or that they're covers for corruption, but for one fundamental reason: the government does not control them. And the government is determined to exert its control and maintain its monopoly on official currency. And that's what's going on right now with Bitcoin.
And by the way, Dick, that particular monopoly was not granted by the Constitution. Yes, the monopoly on violence, the ability to legitimately use force, was something the Constitution granted, with the various caveats towards the states and everything else. But this idea that there would be a central issuer of money that the government could control and restrict access to was never part of the Constitution. The United States, as you know well, battled over this issue internally. Should we have a national bank or not? And it was only 150-ish years into our nation that the Federal Reserve was formed, which really created this monopoly-like power and this centralized issuance, centralized taxation, et cetera, through that act. So we've been at this for about 100 years now. None of us are alive long enough to remember that it does not have to be this way. It wasn't always this way.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Basically, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, I call the privatization of money. It essentially takes the issuance of money out of the hands of the government. And given the piling debts throughout the world and the unbelievable deficits we're running and the inflation that it is directly causing, more power to them, less power to them, to take this power away and limit it. And all the cryptocurrency is trying to do is to compete with that on a privately issued basis. And the government is so freaked out by it, they're determined to basically equate it with the mob and close it down.
Well, you've hit it exactly right. Bitcoin was developed following the global financial crisis in 2008, 2009 by an anonymous individual. No one's really figured out who he or they were. But exactly as you described, this was a reaction to the fear of what was happening with paper money, with fiat money around the world. You know, Voltaire famously said, all paper currencies eventually return to their intrinsic value, i.e. zero. And the idea behind Bitcoin was to create a peer-to-peer payment network so that you and I could transact without the intermediary of a government telling us we could or could not. Now, it used to be that gold allowed the same thing. Bitcoin was conceived as a digital gold. Gold's not so easy to transport across vast distances or across time. Turns out with Bitcoin or other digital currencies, those obstacles are overcome because transactions are instantaneous, they're private. The transactions themselves are visible. So this whole idea that this is a haven for mobsters and criminals is a complete falsehood. 99.9%
The haven for
of these
mobsters
kind of
and
transactions
criminals is cash.
It's cash.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not. Bitcoin. While they don't know who you are, they can see a transaction happened, and that has real virtue in a decentralized network because it does allow for some protection, privacy of the individual's identity. At the same time, it's immutable. It never changes. You can't undo it, or the government can't come back a year later and basically say, well, we don't like what happened there. We're going to unwind or undo it. It's done once and for all. It really is monetary freedom, as you said. And importantly, it is a reaction against the risk of debasement of the currency, devaluation of the dollar. It is hard money. It is monetary freedom.
In an environment in which the dollar has lost a quarter of its value in the last 4 years, I think. And you were giving me stats the other night of like an almost 99% loss of value since the beginning of the 20th century.
Yeah, if you go back to the founding of the Federal Reserve in 1913 and track the value of the dollar, we've lost approximately 99%. So a dollar given to someone born that year in 1913 wouldn't be worth a penny today in terms of what it
My
could
God.
actually acquire.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Michael, for exposing this and for educating us. My eyes glaze over when people talk about bitcoins, but you've helped them remain focused. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick.
Campaign war chests are growing, and that means you'll be seeing a lot more political ads. I'll tell you why those ads won't work. They won't impress smart voters, and that's next.